Did you know, Nier wasn't originally planned as a sequel to the cult classic Drakengard and was meant to be its own series. According to Nier director Yoko Taro, the general concept of the original plot was that worlds within picture books actually exist. Heroes were charged with stopping villains that came from these fairy tales, which is why the main characters and villains within Nier took names from classic fairy tales. This core concept was instead used in the mobile game Sinnoh Alice, which was also directed by Taro. The Japanese version of the original Nier is titled Nier Gestalt, and was published alongside a second version of the game titled Nier Replicant. Unlike in the West, Japan had a different version for each console, with Gestalt appearing on the Xbox 360 and Replicant on the PlayStation 3. In the Japan-only Replicant version, the main character is a young man looking after his sick sister, whereas in Gestalt, it's an older man looking after his sick daughter. Gestalt was brought to the West because the game's publishers, Square Enix, didn't think a Western audience would be okay with a handsome pretty boy protagonist, and Replicant was for a more Japanese audience. Apparently it was a last-minute decision to keep Replicant at all. The American branch of Square Enix was perfectly happy with just Gestalt and wondered if making Replicant would be a waste of time. Both the producer and director stuck to their guns, however, and decided to release both Replicant and Gestalt at the same time. Replicant and Gestalt for Japan, and Gestalt exclusively for the West. Within the Nier universe, there exists a disease called the Black Scrawl that is slowly spreading through the population of Earth. The reason this disease is called a scrawl is because black text will slowly start to engulf the victim's body. The symbols this black text uses is from the Celestial alphabet, featured in Nier and Drakengard. What's even more interesting is that some celestial letters on the Black Scrawl can be made out. A, C, G, and T can all be seen. These seem to stand for adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine, which are all found within DNA. This is meant to symbolize how their internal DNA structure is failing them. The worlds of Drakengard and Nier are clearly connected, and this connection can also be found in a less obvious place, such as the two twins, Deviler and Popola. These two songstresses play a vital part in the story, however their names originated from Drakengard, in the form of a weapon named Deviler Popola, or at least that's what it was called in the Japanese version. It would later be renamed to Skald's Song in the Western release. The idea of sexuality and gender is very important to many of the characters found within Nier. For example, it's easy to miss the fact that Emil, a character who would later turn into the mascot for the series, is homosexual. This is because the game doesn't outright say it, and was only later confirmed in an interview. Taro's mindset behind making Emil gay wasn't for credit or for praise, it was because that was just who Emil was. The same can be said for Kaine, but this has less to do with her sexuality and more so with her anatomy. The game drops very subtle hints throughout that Kaine has been ostracized for having a strange body. When Taro and his co-writer Sawako Notori were pressed in an interview for the book Grimoire Nier, it was confirmed that Kaine is a hermaphrodite. Taro stated, "To me, Kaine being a hermaphrodite wasn't really a point of importance, since people like that do exist in reality, we just don't know about them. I was actually surprised that it garnered so much attention after the game was released." At a game developers conference panel in 2014, Taro also mentioned that the game's events were largely inspired by the World Trade Center disaster. When questioned about his writing process for creating transgressive stories with taboo subjects, Taro also said, "The world is filled with lies and desires in the first place, but I feel like it has a tendency to hide and forbid taboos. We write about the love between a man and a woman and family, but we can't write about sex. There are stories about beauty and growth, but not about aging and perishing. I think that those are lies, and I'm not good at writing lies. I just want to be honest to myself." The most recent entry in the franchise, Nier Automata, is a sequel to Nier and Drakengard by proxy. While it shares the Nier name, it was developed as an entirely standalone game with nods to the original Nier. Yoko Taro has always tried to avoid treading old ground, which is why his titles are drastically different from one another. This is also why finding connections to the original Nier can be difficult to find within Automata. However, there's one cutscene later into the game that describes the machines finding themselves a god which erupts from a volcano. This is one of the more subtle references to the first game, and references the Nier boss P33, otherwise known as BP. This was confirmed in an interview with Taro, stating in order to find out what this god was, you'd have to read the short story Fires of Prometheus. In this short story, it turns out a boss the player fought and seemingly destroyed survived, and began to make its way to the surface. Along the way, it merged with multiple other sentient beings intrigued by the idea of free will, forming a collective consciousness, and no longer referring to itself as I, but we. When a P-33 hive mind erupted from underground, it happened upon a war between androids and machines, giving the battling forces a message that emotion is the meaning of life. Taro has also stated that there was so much backlash and angry internet posts after the events of Drakengard's E ending, which was essentially a gag ending, that he locked himself in a locker to cope with the stress. Maybe Yoko will drag himself to the locker again became a common catchphrase in the workplace due to the love-hate relationship Taro has with his fanbase. Nier Automata has multiple endings as well, one of which lets the player delete their save data in order to make the final boss easier for another player. This was inspired by when Taro first played Dragon Quest as a young boy. He was shifting the cartridge around and his save data was lost. Whilst he was shocked, his parents didn't share the same sentiment, as they couldn't understand why this was such a big deal. This feeling of loss that Taro experienced as a child for a game he spent so much time in was a feeling he wanted the player to experience as well. Before Nier Automata was released, there was a lot of buzz around the central character, 2B, and her extremely detailed buttocks. Not only has it been stated that Yoko jokingly threatened he'd fire all of the modelling team if he didn't make it absolutely perfect, but he went onto Twitter and asked people to send him all of the images of 2B's rear they could find. Sure enough, someone delivered. Taro finalized this minor piece of controversy with this tweet. When I said that I wanted people to gather images of 2B and put them in a zip file for me, the tweet got all kinds of exposure. Now people are actually collecting them. The internet is amazing. And if you want more facts, check out the Did You Know Gaming video on Persona. If you like this video, give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. And if you want to find out what I'm doing, go onto the YouTube channel youtube.com/Mr. Clemps, and just Mr. Clemps on Twitter. I analyze and review JRPGs such as Nier and Drakengard. Thank you all for watching.